Hello and welcome to this new video in the SQL section. From this video onwards, over the next few videos, we will see different options or added features while creating a table. So far in our journey, we have seen decent amount of SQL, and by virtue of this, you would have understood there is a SQL query to every single operation, and there are so many variations in each of the concepts that we have seen. But this is just the start. So make sure that you've practiced everything until now and just keep revising everything and move forward. Another aspect of our course covers is important thing about data warehousing. Now, data warehousing, as I said earlier, is not a different tool altogether. It's a conceptual thing, and these things are implemented into SQL and databases. And here's where we start our journey. We already, by the way, started our journey when we created our very first database or table. But now we are going to go further much more and think about many more things which will help us to make tables in a robust way. So I have already opened up a query which we created in one of the previous videos when we started looking into inserting data. I have this table called employees. Let me see. So there is already this table. I will just check the data. Let me do one thing. Let me drop this table. Drop table employees. So you can just reuse the same query for just using it to save the time. And I create this. And then I insert the data. Let me insert only one row at the moment to start with. And then I will say select star from employees. Fine. Nothing new as of now. Let us now take this row for the second employee and try to insert it. But purposely or maybe unintentionally, what I do is I keep the employee ID as same and run this. So no doubt the data will go through, and once we select, we will see the data. Now there is a problem with this data. Although we have inserted data, it has gone through, there are no errors, that is fine. However, if you look at the employee ID, there is a problem wherein both these employees have the same employee ID, and this cannot be practically possible. As most of us would be working, we all know that we all have a unique employee ID by which the company understands which employee is it. So every employee is given a specific unique ID. It can be either number or alphanumeric, anything. But it cannot be a possibility, or there cannot be a case where two or more employees have the same employee ID. Because if I say I'm talking about employee ID 1, if I fetch the records, if I do a filter on this, I'll get 2 records. So whom exactly I'm referring to? But let us understand, why did this problem arise? So first thing you will say, okay, the root cause was that I inserted the data intentionally or maybe unknowingly, whatever. But that itself is not the root cause. The table did accept this value. What in case if you put a restriction on the table itself so that it doesn't accept the value? Hence, this particular situation won't arise. And even if I try to insert, it should throw an error stating that this key exists already or whatever, right? So this is a very important scenario that you have to understand as a beginner in SQL when you create a table. So here's where we are going to learn a concept called as primary key. Very important. Let us understand. Let me take this query in a new window, paste it. And since we already have the employees table, I will say employees new, employees underscore new. So what I do is, I know that employee ID is my unique identification column. What it means is, I want to make sure that every time when I insert the row, I should not have any repeat values or duplicate values. But how do I make sure I restrict this? There is a way to it. So what you do is, after you take the column, you define the column name, you define the data type. After that, all you got to do is just write a keyword called as primary key. That's it. And this is the most important thing as a beginner that you have to understand in creating tables. Let's run this and start inserting data. I'll copy this 2 rows from here, paste. Before that, let me show you. Select star from employees new. We will validate whether we have anything. We don't have anything. I will insert, let me change the table name and insert the first row. So one row is affected, fine. Now let me insert the second row by changing the table name and say 1 again. Purposely I'm doing this. And now let us see the impact of writing this keyword primary key. In the previous attempt, we inserted 2 rows with the same ID and it went through. But what will happen in this case? Let's find out. When I execute, it throws me an error stating violation of primary key constraint. Whatever the constraint name is, we'll come to this later on. But the most important thing for us is to understand this error message. It says, cannot insert duplicate key in the object. Object means the table. Employees new. The duplicate key value is 1. So it has seen that there is already a value present called 1 and it won't allow you to insert another value unless and until you make this value something which doesn't exist in the table. So if you make 2 and now you run, before I run, I'll again show you that there is only one record for your understanding. And I insert this went through. Why? Because there was no record in the table which had the employee ID 2. And this is fine. Now you see the data has been accepted. So this is extremely important concept of, you can call it as databases while creating table. It is nothing but something like a concept of data warehousing. So there are many things that we are going to learn about data warehousing, but we are going to implement them in our databases of SQL. So as now you would have understood the functionality of primary key. It is a keyword. It has 2 words, primary and key. What it does is it ensures that there are no duplicate values allowed or entered in that particular column. So it maintains uniqueness. Only and only unique values are allowed. So now if you insert the third row, it should have some other ID other than 1 and 2. But this is not the case with this table. So this table, now you would think how important it has become to include the primary key. And like this, there are many other things that we are going to learn as best practices. So you have to be very careful. You have to be, I would say, proactive in understanding these things, and you will get that eventually. So when you create table, you might have thought until now, okay, what's so big deal about that? But you have to pause and just before you run that create table statement, think, does my table need any unique identification ID? If so, add a primary key. All right. Mostly you will see primary keys are added on integer based column, but that's not a hard and fast rule. You can also add it on a varchar or a date time or any other data type. That's fine. We'll talk about the performance of these data types in a different section or a video. So this is what primary key is. It maintains uniqueness. It doesn't allow any duplicates, right? How about just something that we would want to try and eliminate all possibilities and understand more about primary key? Can I insert any null value? Let's see. Let me change the table name. The null means absence of a value. No, you cannot do that. It clearly says column does not allow nulls. This is another great feature or good feature of primary key, that it will not allow duplicates as well as it will not allow nulls. But why is that the case, you might be thinking? The reason is because primary key acts as the record identifier. It is the identity of the entire row. What do I mean by that is, when I select this, if I'm looking at this row, instead of saying I'm looking at the row which belongs to employee John, has the date of joining as Jan 1423 and has the salary 40,000, I simply just say I'm looking at the employee ID 1. So that's what I mean. The primary key is nothing but the record identifier. So this is record 1, this is record 2. Just like each one of us has unique identification. For example, like for us in India, we have a unique identification like our PAN card or Aadhaar card. For people in US, they have that unique identification like social security number, which is SSN. And likewise, it can happen in the same way in other parts of the world also, in different countries. But the bottom line is that these are nothing but your unique identification. Your name cannot be your unique identification, because let's say I can have 2 or more employees with the same name like John or Jack or any other thing, but their ID becomes their unique identification. Hence I say primary key is nothing but it acts as a unique identifier. It's the identity of your entire row. And hence when I say this, now you would have understood. That's why the identity can never be absent, and null is nothing but absence of a value. That's why I'm saying that that is one of the reasons why primary key doesn't accept any null, right? So two things to understand. Primary key maintains uniqueness, no duplicates allowed, and it doesn't accept any null values. And it ensures that you have only and only unique values. Now, if you refresh the tables folder, something, more things to understand. Let us look at employee. This is my previous table, employee. And let me expand the employee's new table to compare. So you see over here, these are your 4 columns and these are your 4 columns. But look at the first column, employee ID itself, and how different it shows as compared to the employees table. All these 4 columns have the same kind of icons in front of them. But look at the employee ID over here. It has a key icon, and in the bracket it says PK before the data type. PK means primary key, and this key icon also denotes the same. However, there was no primary key in the employees. So just by expanding your table structure in the Object Explorer, you come to know whether a table has a primary key or not. Plus, since the primary key doesn't accept any null, now it says not null. And now you complete the circle. When you created the table, right, you were able to see these nulls. So by default, each column is designed to accept null. But when you define a primary key, it automatically says no nulls allowed. We can also impose conditions on other columns to make sure that we don't pass any null. We'll come to that. We are just in that same flow right now of looking into conditions, because primary key is just one condition. So condition is nothing but in SQL it is called as constraint, and primary key is the first constraint that we are learning right now. There are like 4 or 5 constraints which are coming along the way just in this series which we started with this video. So keep in mind, this is of utmost importance at beginner level. I'll give you also a document which highlights or lists all these bullet points. But till that time, you try out these things. And just one more thing to conclude for right now, that you can have only one primary key in a table, because a row can be identified on basis of only one unique, some uniqueness. What it means is you cannot have primary key on multiple columns. So for example, if I insert a new query window, I cannot say this way: primary key for employee ID and primary key for employee name. As soon as you do so, it gives you an error. It says cannot add multiple primary key constraints to the table, whatever. So this is another concept. But for now, even if I'm just telling this upfrontly to you, at times people might try this. Then you might think, how can I get uniqueness on any other column? Yes, I do agree that you might feel that need. I'll come to that section or that particular scenario, how you will do that in a different way. But one thing is for sure, in a table there can be only one primary key, because it's the identifier, and a record can be identified only by one way. However, the catch is your primary key can have one or more than one column. Now by this statement you might get confused. On one end I am saying there can be only one primary key, and on the other end I am saying there can be more than one column. How is that possible? So the primary key can be only one. It can include one or more than one column, but when you want to include more than one column, this is not the way we do. We combinedly create that primary key by passing 2 columns in a separate statement, and we'll learn about that in the later part of this section. Until then, you just stick to what I have covered in this video. Thanks, and see you in the next video.